Hey guys, hope you're all doing okay. Today I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know about PCSX2, how to set up the emulator, what do all the options mean. This is going to be a detailed video and I'm going to put timestamps in the description. However, I highly recommend watching the whole video to fully understand the emulator and its functioning. So without further ado, let's get started. PCSX2, as you know, PlayStation 2 emulator, is so far the only competent way to play PS2 titles on other platforms. There are other emulators for PS2, but they were never able to come out of alpha phase of the development process. I've been closely monitoring every single build of this emulator since 2009, and it has come a long way. It's more streamlined and simplified now than ever. A lot of painstaking development has gone in the way to take the emulator where it is now. To give you some context, here are the official minimum requirements for the emulator. Let's call it low end. And here are the recommended requirements. Let's call it mid-end, and anything above that is high-end. PCSX2 has been in development for more than 18 years and it is still not 100% efficient, and only 17 games out of 2,664 are perfect, meaning that they are completely indistinguishable to tell whether you're running on an emulator or the console. Playable means you can get 60 FPS or plus, but it's not 100% distinguishable. It's all because of the architecture. Toshiba Emulation engine. This had a very weird and different architecture than anything out there. That is the single reason why it's so hard to develop this emulator. I mean, massive kudos to PCSX2 development members, all previous and current. They have worked so hard on this project. My undying gratitude towards them and the communities. Okay, so we need to download the emulator. As a recording of this video, you can download the PCSX2 from their official website. Now there are two versions of this emulator. One is the stable mainstream release, which is 1.6.0, and it's the stable release. It's not updated as often as the nightly builds. The stable release ensures that you get the best performance, but if you want the latest and greatest, you need to download the latest nightly build, which is available at the link given in the description. I recommend the nightly build as they are constantly fixing bugs and irregularities, so just download the latest nightly build. And to do that, we're just gonna have to Google this, automated PCSX2 builds. And if you click on the first link, it's gonna give us all the list of all the emulator revisions. And we're just gonna download the latest one, so just press download, and after that it's downloaded, we're gonna have this file. So I already downloaded, I don't need to do it again. So let's close that for now. If you've decided to go with the stable release, then just install the exe file where you desire and it should be good to go. However, we have decided to go with the nightly builds, and it's just a zip file that you can extract whenever you want and wherever you want. Both of these builds come with all the necessary plugins and memory cards, but they don't come with the BIOS. BIOS is the basic input-output system of the console, and for legal purposes, I have to elaborate that the ethical and legal way is to dump your own BIOS from your PlayStation 2 console. There are tons of places online where you can download BIOS if you just Google it, but I don't recommend you do this because it is illegal. Anyways, after you've done acquiring the BIOS, just put them in the BIOS folder. And now let's extract our emulator. So I'm just going to extract it here and let's launch it. Okay, so I'm gonna keep it the default language. You can select any other language if you want and click next. These are the two plugins that are available to us for now. Just leave them as they are because we're gonna go into detail about them later in the video. And now we need to select the BIOS path. So just select wherever your BIOS is stored. Mine is here, so I'm just gonna select this folder, and you can select this one, USA console version, just for the sake of simplicity. Okay, now we're at the UI. We have launched the emulator. Let's first take a look at the UI. First option is boot ISO, which is going to let you boot straight into your chosen PS2 game. Pause and shut down are basically pretty self-explanatory. Then we have run ELF. ELF is basically the extension of PS2 boot files. For example, most of the softwares and games for PS2 came with the ELF file, which you can boot without the entire game for debugging purposes and stuff like that. Fast boot lets you skip the PS2 startup, where you saw the Sony logo and the animation. It lets you skip all of that. You can create a block dump if you want to dig into some specific files, or if you're having some issues, you can refer to your dump. If you have any specific game related issues, you can use these patches from here. You can use cheats. Enable host file system tries to emulate PS2 like file system, but it's your computer files. Load and save state lets you load and save a state of the game, and backup before save lets you go back if you accidentally save a state instead of loading. Okay, so honestly, PCSX2 has improved so much over the years that you probably don't need these patches or fixes. So if you go into the CD DVD section, we can see that it lets you choose the ISO files to boot, and if you have a DVD drive, which most people don't, but it's an old computer, so I do have a DVD drive, you can just choose that and you can boot from your disk if you want to. No disk will let you boot into BIOS instead of the game. If you want to tinker with stuff, I'll go over in detail about these settings, so it's going to be later in the video. Multi-tap is a PS2 feature which lets you map more controllers than just one. So if you want more than one controller, for example, for player 1 or player 2, you can take multi-tap every 60 minutes, and if after an hour passes. The window show, debug, and show console they're pretty self-explanatory. If you show debug, this is our debugger, and if you're not doing debugging, then there's no point of having this. And show console is this little window right here. You can hide it or you can show, up to you. And capture video, it's gonna capture the video, or you can take a screenshot, up to you. And if you need any kind of specific help, you can go to the help section. Okay, so this window is pretty important because it tells us like a bunch of cool stuff about our machine. For example, it's telling me that I have this operating system, RAM, the processor, and most importantly this. These are called instruction sets, which are like CPU power tools. So I recommend that you leave this enabled because it's going to give you a lot of information. Okay, so let me explain what these are. To put it in layman terms, these are CPU power tools. The instruction sets which can improve CPU's performance drastically, assuming your workload can support these. These are extremely tricky to implement into programs. SSE2 is for really old computers like Pentium 4 or Intel Atom and dual core Pentium D, stuff like that. The newer version SSE3 were developed for Core 2 and i3s and lower end machines, while SSE4, 4.1 and 4.2 and AVX2 are for newer machines, and these are way better than the previous iterations. So far so good. Alright, now let's jump into settings, and to start off we're just gonna start with emulation settings, the meat and tutorials, the meat and potatoes of this tutorial. The developers say that these are the best settings for most games, with extremely few exceptions. If you have a competent PC with a mid-range COD or higher, these will work fine for you. However, if you have a low-end or even a mid-range PC, these can come in handy. The preset is enabled, and first we gotta disable that to get into the settings. And these presets come with some predefined settings. For example, the first one is the safest option. It's put to safe to default. It means that very minor optimizations are going to be made. and only a number of hacks are going to be enabled. And if you choose one which is safest, it means that there are no hacks being applied, so it's going to run natively without any hacks. If you have a really high-end PC like a GTX 1080 or something like that, I recommend this option, as this is going to give you the smoothest experience possible. Okay, and then we have 2, which is safe default. The safer option, it's only going to apply like only a couple of hacks and modifications to make sure that we're able to get the best performance with a little bit of tweaks, ensuring that we get the best FPS possible. Then at 3, we have balanced. If your games are running slower, you can use this preset, as it will enable more hacks. It is a really nice option with good stability. It is recommended if you have a relatively lower spec PC. The key to getting the best performance for low-end PCs is to try different settings combination. Then we have 4, which is aggressive, and I mean literally. You're increasing the number of hacks being applied, so you're going to see artifacts in your games, decreased performance, but sometimes increased performance in a few games. Stuttering, FMV, crashing, and absolutely not recommended unless you're debugging or you have a PC from the 90s. Next level is 5, which is extremely aggressive. So this is the second last level of preset that we can apply. This is really going to apply a lot of hacks and a lot of optimizations and tweaks to make sure that we are getting the most amount of FPS possible, but it's also going to break your games entirely. You're going to get like significantly lower FPS, and it's not going to run very well. So this option is absolutely not recommended. It's only for debugging purposes, because developers wanted to see how far they can push this emulator on the lower end of the spectrum. Okay, so then we have 6, which is mostly harmful. I mean, the name says it all. It's mostly harmful. You get all the hacks, all of the tweaks, all the optimizations are going to be turned down, and they're not going to play nice with each other. So, and you're going to get 700 and 800 FPS, but your screen's going to be black, because trust me, I've tried this before in the past, but it's not good at all. Okay, now we have presets out of the way. Let's get into each option. First, we have Emotion Engine and IOP, which is the Toshiba Emotion Engine that I mentioned earlier. The emulator tries to emulate the backbone of PS2 in here. Recompiler is the fastest option, and Interpreter is only for debugging purposes. Do not enable Emotion Engine cache, because it does not play well with the rest of the configuration. Then we have Advanced Recompiler options here. These are special operating modes of the compiler with a little bit of extra features. I highly recommend leaving it to Chop 0 and Normal, because it has the best implementation. The rest only work in very specific scenarios, and they're not going to improve the performance that much. And then if we go into VUs, then we have Micro VU Recompiler for VU0 and VU1. Leave it as it is. This is the new revision of the compiler. It has way more compatibility than the old one, and not to mention, it is way less prone to errors and emulates accurately. There was another option in here called Super VU Recompiler, which was an experimental recompiler, and it did increase the performance in certain titles. They removed it with the latest revisions, because I think it wasn't that practical and it might have caused some issues. In this section, GS, you can disable frame limiter if you want. So it's uncaps FPS is pretty self-explanatory. Okay. MTGS, this one is only for debugging purposes. Here you can adjust the frame rate if you want. Not that useful. Next up is Frameskipping. Frameskipping is a technique where a couple of frames are dropped to give you the illusion that the game is faster. It's for the lower end PCs, and you can use it to make your game run faster, sacrificing the smoothness in the process. You can keep it disabled, but when you hit the tab, it will enable frame skip. So if you choose this option. For example, I don't want it enabled all the time, just in some games, so I can just press tab to enable it. Third option is constant skipping. In here you can specify how many frames you want to skip from a certain number of frames. For example, for every 60 frames that I draw, I can skip 5 of them. So it's going to give me a pretty good experience considering my low end hardware. And you can also keep it to 7. This is the sweet spot where the experience is bearable and the game is playable. But if you skip too many frames, then it's not gonna be playable. You're not gonna know what's happening. Next up, in the window, GS window, you can specify the size of the window and aspect ratio. Some game cutscenes have black bars at the top and bottom, so you can just to give it more cinematic feel, then you can just select one of them to make sure that the aspect ratio plays nicely with the FMVs. Okay, you can override this and apply full screen options from this tool. Okay, here we can specify the size of our custom window if you're gonna be using your custom window instead of a full screen. VSync is a synchronization tool which prevents your screen from tearing, but it can also take a toll on your performance. I recommend it leaving off or adaptive unless you have a really terrible screen tearing effect. Next up is speed hacks. These ones are the hacks that actually affect your performance in majority of the cases. First up, we have emotional engine cycle rate. If we go to the left, we increase performance by reducing CPU requirements. Low-end PCs select the first level, so just this one, -1. I should warn you, going further will only break your games. For example, if you go here or here, it's only gonna break your games. To the right, you can adjust the cycle, which will increase your CPU requirements, but it's good for games which have uncapped FPS, and you can use more FPS to gain more performance. Only use level 1 if your CPU is high-end, because other levels can crash the game and the emulator. There are very few exceptions which can have a performance gain if you decrease the CPU requirements all the way to the left. You can try this if none of the other configurations seem to work. This toggle is there to decrease the clock speed if you're at the low end, or increase the clock speed if you're at the high end to get more performance and more frame rates respectively. Just like frame skipping, EE cycle skipping can skip some cycles of the process, which can make your game run faster in a very few scenarios. Only use the first level. So normally at default it's at here 0, but you can use this one if you're having some speed up issues. Only these options are going to play nice with the rest of your configurations, because these have very good stability and compatibility. So I recommend leaving these on, because on most of the hardware configurations, these are gonna play nice with the rest of your configuration. So just leave them on. In my experience, this one, MTUV, is a huge speed up if you have multiple cores. Even if you have 2 or more cores, it's worth trying. I've had huge success with this option. These are the Gamefixes, and I recommend keeping them disabled and only using them if you have that specific problem in a specific game. Alright, now that we're done with this, I'm just gonna cancel it, and now let's go to audio settings. So these are pretty self-explanatory. And one tip, you can leave the audio disabled, no sound. And sometimes, like only in a very few scenarios, it can increase your performance. So if you have a really low-end computer, you can leave it off, and you're gonna see a somewhat in performance increase. So I recommend using 0 nearest fastest bad quality if you have a low-end PCs, but select 4 if you have a relatively high-end PC or even a mid-range PC. And here you can adjust the volumes and latency. And the next one is memory card. Here you can specify the path for your card, and there are also some programs you can launch to actually get the dump from your PS2 console memory cards and then convert the files to make sure that all of your save games are available on this emulator as well. Now let's go to plugin and BIOS selector. In the latest build, there are only 2 plugins available. Before there were like 8 plugins. Now most of the stuff is integrated into the emulator itself, so we don't need external plugins for stuff. Now we're gonna cover the second last setting, lily pad, which if we go to configure, it's just the controller mapping you can do. Raw input is a method where whatever you type with your keyboard is the input is going to be sent to the game or the emulator without mapping to anything. Direct input is the old legacy method of taking input, and it is more suitable to the old controllers. In mouse API, you can enable the game to take inputs from the mouse. I recommend using Windows messaging unless you're playing a very specific game with a tricky input system like controllers with the steering wheels and fake guns, etc. Enable logging is gonna log every event, and it will be available in the lilypad log file if you want to track down a specific event or an error, or if you want to get bottom of an issue. In pad 1, you can map to your heart's content in the different things, and you can also adjust the sensitivity settings in here. Last setting I changed the most when I had a low-end PC is the GSDX. We have 2 options. First is AVX2 and SSE4. SSE2 is only for the low-end PCs. Please don't enable that because it's going to give you like really bad performance. So if you have this option, just choose this option because this is the fastest option available. SSE4 is for the relatively new ones where you don't have AVX2 available to you. And the best extension to use is AVX2. This is the best extension and instruction set available to take advantage of the newer architectures, and the best performing as well. If you have this extension available on your machine, please select this from the plugins, and it's the best performing one. You can see it in the console windows which extension and instruction sets that you have available in here. That's why I said that we should have it enabled. Okay. Let's get to configuration, and for some reason I can't go into configuration. So if I go into configuration, let me select AVX2. That's new. I got an error. The CPU does not support AVX2. It's a 3rd generation i5. Okay, so a good example. We're just gonna use SSE4 because the configuration inside the plugin is just pretty much the same. If you have a high-end PC, go with OpenGL as it's relatively more accurate render, but it requires a little bit of oomph. If you have a low to mid-end PC or even a relatively high-end machine, always use Direct3D 11 because it's faster while also keeping accuracy intact. If you don't have a graphics card, you can use a software-based rendering, but it's gonna be way too slow. But if you have a high-end machine with no graphics card, it's going to give you a playable performance. Sometimes in PCSX2 games, you can see a visible shaking of the output screen itself. So you can use the interlacing feature where you can cope with this issue. Each of these interlacing options can be used depending on which way your screen is shaking. If it's shaking to the right side or the left side or downwards or upwards, you can use one of them. And texture filtering, we're just gonna leave it to bilinear PS2 because this is the best option, or you can leave it to nearest if you have a low-end PCs. Otherwise, I recommend leaving it to bilinear PS2. And the rest of the settings, this one, internal resolution. So the native is only going to render at 480p, but if you have a mid-end PC, just select 2x native. It's not going to take that much of a performance toll, so I recommend leaving it at 2x 720p. But if you have a low end, you can choose it. You can choose native. And this one, allow 8-bit texture. This is going to enable or disable 8-bit texture. If you have a GPU, a good GPU, then leave it enabled. But if you don't have if you have a low-end GPU, then leave it disabled because then CPU is going to handle most of the tasks. Anti-scoring filtering, you can specify what scale do you want it, 2x, 4x, 8x, or 16x. Dithering is if you see a specific artifact in your game, you can leave it to off, but normally just leave it on scale as there are a very few number of games that's gonna affect the performance. MIP mapping automatic default is gonna see if your game and your configuration supports it, so it's automatically gonna set, but you can leave it off if you see like stuttering, sudden stuttering or sudden jump in the FPS, you can leave it off. But I think automatic is okay. These are specific hacks for the games, and we're just gonna leave it to automatic, or you can leave it to none. I recommend leaving it medium if you have a high-end PC, otherwise just leave it to none. And if you want to tinker with some specific shader settings, like brightness, contrast, or saturation, you can use these options, but they're not going to affect your performance. And if you want to mess with shader compilation and red, blue hues, you can use this option. Now, these are important because sometimes you get lines, vertical lines in your games, and these options can help you disable them. Or sometimes you get horizontal lines or some GSDX artifacts, like you're gonna see some bugs or errors or some discrepancies. So if you see any of that, I recommend leaving these 3 options. But I recommend that you keep them disabled if you don't see, if it's only for that specific scenario. Just click OK, OK, and that's it. Alright guys, that was our basic look into the PCSX2 emulator. And now that we have come at the end of the tutorial, I'm gonna give you the recommended settings that I use for low-end machines first. So let's go to emulation settings. I'm just gonna keep it disabled and keep it in mind for lower spec PCs. Disable frame limiting constant skipping. Actually, I'm just gonna select this. Fit to window and screen off, and that's fine, and I'll leave it disabled. Keep it 1 and 1, and I press OK. Now for the video settings. I keep it D3D and use this. I always enable this on the low-end PCs and native PlayStation 2. I disable this unless I see some artifacts in the game. Okay, so that was your settings for low-end PCs. But if you want some high-end settings, then you can choose the following settings. These are going to be the same. Disabled, no frame skipping, GS window, it's going to be the same. And I would recommend that you choose this to adaptive. Enable speed hacks. Just leave them to 0, it's not going to do anything, and enable this option. Okay, and if you go into video settings, it says no plugin loaded. Direct 3D11 or OpenGL. OpenGL is a little bit more accurate. So let's leave it to OpenGL, automatic bilinear, and then if you have a good GPU, disable that, and you can enable it, any of these options depending on your PC. So what I leave it to 3x native, and I enable large frame buffer. It can prevent flickering, and it doesn't have that much of a toll on your machine. And I don't do any of these settings. Okay, so these were your settings for the high-end and relatively mid-end PCs. So there you have it, guys. This was your complete guide to PCSX2. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching.